Hey there, I'm Aki. I made Call of the Void, and there was actually a lot that went wrong with making the trailer. So here's some behind the scenes. Way back in 2019, I was talking to some modders regarding a mod idea I had about islands in the void you could go and explore with a new submarine. Sound familiar? This didn't end up working out, sadly, but when Subnautica content started to dry up about 2 years ago, I decided to revisit the idea. Some of you might know this, but I'm actually a 3D artist, and I just asked some of my friends at my academy if they wanted to help out. And yes, they did. So I just started sketching a rough storyboard for what I envisioned the trailer to look like. Now, my abysmal art skills aside, please don't judge me, I think you can see that we actually stayed really close to the original vision of the trailer. The only thing we decided to add later on was the Mesmer Leviathan encounter. Yes, you heard that right. We'll get back to that, okay? The next step was obviously getting an actual reference and concept art for everything. This took quite a while, but we ended up commissioning artists on Fiverr, and one of them, for example, drew art of the 2 islands which we wanted to model and have in the trailer. We also went in Subnautica and took a bunch of screenshots for every possible thing we could possibly want in the trailer. As for the submarine, that's actually an old Subnautica concept. If you've been following me for a few years, you might even remember that I let you guys vote on what to call this submarine. So you were actually the ones that decided on the name Hydra. We actually ended up using a bunch of old Subnautica concepts that were never used, since that's the easiest way to get the style right, and that's a big thing. Like, Subnautica has a very recognizable art style, so getting that right was a big challenge. But we also looked at fan-made concepts. The Lumiosidon, or Treader as it was originally called, was actually one we implemented in the trailer. This is a really old fan-made concept from before the actual sea treaders came out. So the artist just predicted there would be walking sea creatures called Treader in the game, which I find hilarious. In my opinion, this underwater giraffe is much cuter though. Since we knew crystals were also going to play a big part in Call of the Void, we just had to find a way to incorporate them into the creatures for reasons I won't get into just yet. For the Lumizodon, it already had some glowing spots, so we just used those, but we also wanted a new version of a peeper. So an artist friend of mine came up with some concepts, and we actually ended up using this one. We did also have a void peeper, but that ended up being scrapped because it just didn't look good. But enough concepting for now. Let's get into the making of the actual trailer. I've decided to just have some of the earlier models and versions of the trailer playing in the background, because some people really enjoy that stuff apparently, while I talk about some of the challenges we had, because there were quite a few. Yeah, this was not easy, which is why it took 2 years. If this scene looked familiar to you, but you didn't quite know why, let me refresh your memory. This was originally supposed to be this scene from an earlier Subnautica concept. The single cell biome. Yes, you got that right. But since we didn't actually have an animator on our team and I did all the animations, which was awful by the way, I suck at this. I just didn't think I could pull off that. And we had a really hard time actually getting the model for those vines to look good as well. So we decided to just go for tentacles. If in doubt, do tentacles. Yeah, that usually works out with Subnautica. Or teeth or tentacles. Good thing there was a suspicious amount of tentacle tutorials on YouTube. However, I do not recommend looking up tentacle references. Trust me. The things I have seen. Okay, but my notes here just say chair now, so let me explain why this project made me start hating chairs. In the storyboard, you can see the character standing in the submarine, but since the Hydra is supposed to be able to turn basically 90 degrees sideways, they would just fall over whenever they do that. So we had to come up with a way for them to sit in a chair and still pilot the submarine. Now we thought about making some sort of gyro chair that rotated to counter the submarine rotation, but that would have just blown our budget out of the water. So that's why we decided to go for a normal, everyday sci-fi chair. And you would not believe how scarce concepts for sci-fi chairs that would even remotely fit into Subnautica are. So not only did we have to model the chair, we also had to come up with a concept or design that looks like it fits in Subnautica and also still looks sci-fi. None of us are designers or concept artists, mind you, so we have no idea how to do any of this stuff. So this simple chair took 2 months. Yeah. The fish schools did actually not take that long, because they are not animated by hand, because one, I'm just not good enough for that, and two, it was taking ages, but they're actually just a particle system that we told to follow a certain point and do some weird movements along the way, and I think it ended up looking really good. Another particle system we used was for the teleportation effect, and I think that came out really nice. Let's get back to the Mesmer Leviathan I talked about earlier. This transition section between the two islands is supposed to symbolize an anomaly, as you could encounter it in the game. Like usual, your submarine informs you of an anomaly, but if you seem to be ignoring it, it will suddenly start insisting more and more to check it out. And if you get close enough, well, the Mesmer Leviathan will be very happy. The Mesmer Leviathan doesn't actually influence your submarine though. It influences your mind to make you think it's your submarine talking to you and telling you to come closer. Just like the normal Mesmer does with your PDA. Why didn't we show the Mesmer Leviathan? Well, we just didn't have the time or budget to get a model or animations for it done, but I think keeping it more mysterious like we did in the trailer actually ended up working really well. The shadows you see moving past here are actually just strange bone shapes. They don't really symbolize anything. They were just there to have something hush past the camera and give you a feeling of not knowing what's out there. But if you want to know more about the Mesmer Leviathan, it will be featured in a future deep dive video. So you know the drill, subscribe, click the bell, and so on so you get notified when I upload that video. While editing, I also stumbled across this old version of the second island. It looks remarkably similar, especially when it comes to camera movement, but obviously a lot of stuff is missing, and my favorite model are the trees. Look at that, isn't that just beautiful? We also had annotations for anything we didn't have yet, so like pyramid powering up or shadow rushing past, so that was also pretty funny. I've seen some people wonder why there's a Cryptosuchus in the void, and well, it wasn't supposed to be there. We actually planned on having a different creature, this one, swim past the camera here, but again, time and budget. I know it's getting boring, but you have to remember, we were only 3 people. We did not have the time or budget to get another new model for this creature then. So that's why we ended up replacing it with just a retextured version of the Cryptosuchus in Below Zero. This wouldn't actually be on the island if it was in the game, mainly because we're not allowed to backport anything from Below Zero to the original game, but also it would be kind of boring. There's actually multiple of them on this island, but again, they're supposed to all be different creatures. There was also a bunch of stuff we didn't actually manage to fix in the final trailer, and you can still see those mistakes. But instead of spending a ton of time on them, let's just do a lightning round. In the first scene, this is actually noise and not blinking lights, but it ended up looking cool, so we kept it. This crystal actually jumped to the final position immediately, and we had to hide it, but didn't quite work out. The floor in this scene flickers slightly. It used to be much worse, but we fixed most of it, but that fixed caused this plant to go invisible. The fog in this and the next scene is slightly noisy at the start for some reason. I don't know what caused it, but it fixed itself later on. The bubbles in this scene are reflecting the light from the island, which looks really bad. The tree colors in this scene were tracked by hand, but I messed up, so they slide to the left for a few frames. The fog on this island had some major layering problems, and I just couldn't get it fixed, so I just left it. We forgot to key out a floating fog light in this scene with a bunch of invisible creatures. In this scene, there is no floaters keeping the island afloat. Whew, okay, now let's go to rendering. Overall, we had to really optimize the scenes, since you can see even just moving in the scene itself is very laggy, which is mainly due to the kelp over here. Yeah, if I could do it again, I would just not add this kelp and decide on like a different type of biome. It was such a pain. I have no idea how they did it in Subnautica without completely killing your FPS. In case you don't know how 3D animations work, to get realistic reflections, the best quality and textures, realistic lighting and so on, you have to render them. This basically means telling your computer to go over every frame and calculate where each ray of light is coming from, bouncing off of, and finally landing. And this takes time. When it came to actually rendering this trailer, we found that we had a problem. We had so many different effects in the trailer, like the fog for the headlights and underwater mist, bubbles, simulations, collisions, the fish, and on the first island mainly the kelp, that it would either crash when trying to render or take about 5 hours per frame for the first island scene. Now mind you, that scene alone has over 2,000 frames. This means it would have taken 16 months to render that scene alone. Of course, some scenes were faster and we could actually render them in a reasonable amount of time, but we still needed that scene as well, so it was time to optimize. Luckily, our academy had a dedicated PC for rendering heavy scenes like this, and it would only take about 5 minutes per frame on that scene there. Unluckily, it didn't work. It kept crashing. Of course, what else? Turns out something was wrong with that computer and it took them 6 months to fix it. That was probably the biggest delay in releasing the trailer we had, so that was fun. We also had to disable all those fancy effects you saw earlier, like the fog and motion blur, depth of field, and so on, because they increased render time massively. So we decided to just do that in post. Big mistake. So yeah, compositing is the step where we take our renders and make them actually look good. That's quite a difference, and without it, it would not have looked nearly as good. The bad part is, this does not use layers like you might expect from Photoshop or another editing program. It uses nodes. Yeah. Now, to be fair, this isn't very organized, but still, it's horrible. This took like 5 months between another compositor and me to get done, and we even had help from someone who does this for a living. The biggest problem was probably that we couldn't preview anything, and actually had to render it every time we wanted to see what it looked like in motion. This is also where we added all the fancy effects, like these lens flares, or the laser, or like some particles swimming around in the ocean. And after that, it was finally done. The before and after is really quite drastic, and I hope you like the final product. And that's how we made Call of the Void. Stick around for a new deep dive next week on how exactly the Hydra submarine works. I hope you're excited for that. I also hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye!